Did you know that almost 1% of America is currently serving time in a federal, state, or local prison? This graph from the Prison Policy Initiative in 2020 shows that 1/5 of the world's prisoners are American. As voters, there is a moral duty to understand social issues and to hold representatives accountable. Now, I feel confident giving my speech today because I used articles that were published in a scholarly journal and reviewed by expert peers. With these and other sources, I'm going to argue that mass incarceration in America is a real issue, and it can be traced back to racial patterns, capital gains, and government compliance. Now, slavery ended with the ratification of the 13th Amendment in December of 1865. Mass incarceration, Jim Crow, segregation, all show lingering ideals. Mass incarceration and prison labor are modern-day servitude, and Jim Crow laws are too current to felon repercussions. Jim Crow laws included biased reading requirements, stringent property qualifications, and complex poll taxes. Britannica, 2021. Gregory W. Lee, in the religious peer-reviewed article, Mercy in Mass Incarceration, Augustinian Reflections on the New Jim Crow, considers Augustine's writing on criminal justice, attending especially to his emphasis on mercy. He says that felon records prevent public housing, employment opportunities, food stamps, the right to serve on a jury, and the right to vote. Felons suffer extra punishment after their time in prison, and that's expulsion from society. Now, Lee also discusses the causes of mass incarceration. He says that it did not arise from white hatred of blacks, and they just wanted capital. They didn't care how it devastated the black people. And mass incarceration is a racial caste system that does not depend on racist individuals. So just like slavery, it didn't matter where they came from, just the ability to control a group of people and exploit them for cheap labor. Rachel Curry from the Market Realist states, for federal prisons, the Unicor employed inmates make anywhere from 23 cents to $1.15 an hour. And many prisoners make nothing at all. I'll explain how that's legal later. Now, Rachel continues, and she says that prison labor norm is more than an American issue. It is a race and class issue, and the criminal clause in the 13th Amendment is the root of it. Now, basically explained, the criminal clause is a rider that allows servitude to be a punishment for a crime. That's still constitutional to this day. Now, the government allows profit from prison labor because they also are profiting. Rebecca Cooper discusses the American Legislative Exchange Council in her scholarly review article, The Hidden Corporate Profits in the U.S. Prison System, Unorthodox Policymaking. She found that ALEC seeks to expand private prison in 3 ways. First, by promoting the greater use of private prisons' goods and services. Second, by the greater use of prison labor. And finally, by increasing the size of the prison population. And that's just currently. So, early ALEC legislation, like how Cooper later states, the 1995 Prison Industrial Act allowed prisons to contract with private firms for the use of prison labor, land, and facilities. So, prison labor was used before this act, but facilities were required to pay inmates the state minimum wage, which left little room for industrial profit. After its passage, though, prisons were able to appropriate prisoner wages for housing and administrative costs, thereby enabling prison profiteering from inmate labor. Now, this law is still in effect today, just like the criminal clause. Yeah, it's sad, it's rough. Now, I wanted to use my counter argument as a chance to end on a lighter note. I want to say that there are good people out there. There are people that run their facilities to incorporate reform and to break the cycle of poverty. This photo by Angela Ponce is called Peruvian Inmates at Work. This carcel label in the picture in Cusco has the more experienced inmates train the other weavers until they developed a vocational skill and work a 5-hour shift 5 days a week. Now, the earnings in Peru are benchmarked against the national minimum wage, and prison profiteering is closely monitored, and the women actually have money to send back home to their families. Now, a 51-year-old widow and mother of 6 was serving for drug trafficking. She told the New York Times in 2019, "I am looking forward to getting out and buying my own machine. Working in this textile workshop takes me away from my imprisonment." For-profit prisons don't have to be terrible. With the right local leaders, we can see nationwide legislation and we can see change. Mass incarceration is modern-day servitude, and a lot of consumer goods are going to be produced with this labor. But we can affect legislation, and ALEC can stop the profit from corporate involvements with the prison industrial complex. As modern racial relations progress, it is vital to rally together and to hold representatives accountable for updating these laws. There are men and women being over-incarcerated just for cheap labor, and it's constitutional. As American consumers and voters, it is a moral duty to speak out and interact with local and federal policies and keep an eye out for each other. I wanted to close and say to you guys today, just with a quote from Dalai Lama. He said, "Love and compassion are necessities, not luxuries. Without them, humanity cannot survive."